In today's biased news, a military coup in Niger, the US continues to escalate tensions around Taiwan, and conservatives meltdown over a movie about dolls. A military coup was declared in the African country of Niger this past Wednesday, with the former president and other members of government held at the presidential palace. It's currently unclear who the leader of this coup is, and the action has drawn widespread condemnation primarily from the former colonial hegemon, France, as well as the US and regional blocs. In a television broadcast after the coup, the soldiers that mutinied announced themselves as the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Country, stating that they've dissolved the constitution, suspended all institutions, and closed all the borders. The West and Russia have called for the return of the president and constitutional order. The US has gone as far as to say they support action by the United Nations Security Council in the uranium-rich and geopolitically valuable nation, formerly closely allied with the West. This is the 7th coup in West and Central Africa since the pandemic, no doubt spurred by the consequences of inflation, debt restructuring, unemployment, and regional instability following the NATO destruction of Libya and French meddling in Mali. Currently, pro-coup demonstrations are taking place in the capital city, especially after the army command declared its support. Some crowds have been seen waving Russian flags, though so far there is no indication of Russian involvement. Acts of vandalism and further demonstrations have been banned until further notice during this period of instability. On Thursday morning, a French military aircraft landed in Niger, with no comment from the French foreign or defense ministries. As the situation develops, it's difficult to say who stands to gain directly. Regardless, inorganic development of borders by colonial decree, systematic impoverishment through the exploitation of African countries by their former colonial masters, and continuous meddling in their internal affairs unsurprisingly fosters resentment and countermovements within these nations. Unless they are allowed to develop according to their own will, the rampant instability of the region will remain, along with all its consequences. In an interesting turn of events, Igor Girkin, a prominent Russian pro-war blogger and former FSB officer, was arrested in Moscow for his vocal criticism of President Putin and the military's actions in Ukraine. As one of Russia's well-known Milbloggers, as well as the founder of a new ultra-right political party, the Angry Patriots Club, Girkin had grown increasingly critical of the military's handling of operations in Ukraine. Over the past few months, he's taken his criticism to another level, openly lambasting not only the Russian state, but also President Putin himself. It appears that the tipping point for the Kremlin was reached when Girkin referred to President Putin as a lowlife and a cowardly bum in a scathing post on his Telegram channel. The age of US political leaders is raising concerns, as seen in Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell's recent freeze-up. 90-year-old Dianne Feinstein also had an episode during a Senate vote. At 80 years old, Joe Biden is the oldest US president ever, nearly 2 decades older than the median age of national leaders worldwide. While gerontocracy is an issue around the world, the problem is becoming particularly acute in the US. In yet another dangerous escalation, the United States is set to announce over $300 million worth of military assistance to Taiwan. The aid package, authorized by Congress in the 2023 budget, will likely include 4 unarmed reconnaissance drones. However, this is still subject to change, as some of the more advanced equipment on the drones might need to be removed due to access restrictions by the US Air Force. The formal announcement will not specify the weapon systems being provided to Taiwan. An unclassified US intelligence report released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has claimed that China is helping Russia evade Western sanctions, and is likely providing Moscow with technology for use in Ukraine. The report alleges China's role in providing navigational equipment, jamming tech, and fighter jet parts to sanctioned Russian government-owned defense companies, despite international sanctions and export controls. Of course, the Western definition of international is, well, the West. Most of the world doesn't feel the need to play along with the US's theatrical sanctions on other countries. And to end with some positive culture war news, the new Barbie movie is triggering the conservatives. Little Ben Shapiro is unsurprisingly having a meltdown, but more than that, rabid conservative lawmakers claim that Hollywood is trying to manipulate the American public with Chinese propaganda in a movie about dolls. They argue that a cartoon map in the film depicts China's 9-dash line, used to assert control over the South China Sea, legitimizing China's position. Regardless of what you think of the film, its effect on conservative brain rot has been a cinematic experience of its own. And for that, we thank it. That's all for today. We'll be back on Monday with more news. If you missed them, be sure to check out our previous episodes by following the links on your screen. As always, you can support the show and get the news in text form a few hours early by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought.